Hey guys, SuperPet98 here. I just wanted to talk to you about why Space Jam is so special to me. You'll notice on this channel I make a lot of videos about Space Jam. It's my favorite movie, and I want to go into that. The reason why I think it's so special, not just to me, but to the Looney Tunes in general, and this is something that I think there's a lot of Looney Tunes fans that don't understand this, but the people who really get the film Space Jam and why it's special, I do think they understand this. It opened up the world of the Looney Tunes. It opened up their whole realm of the imagination of their world, and it explained things about the Looney Tunes world that were never explanations before. For instance, Space Jam explains where the Looney Tunes live. They established that and how it made sense in the real world, how they lived underground, and it was very mysterious. And there's a lot of world building going on in Space Jam. Another reason why Space Jam's special, the second reason, is because it was the Looney Tunes collectively facing the biggest threat they ever had before, where now the Looney Tunes, they were always enemies with one another, but they were forced to team up with one another to take on this new terrible force known as the Monstars. This kind of concept of all the Looney Tunes forcing to team up with one another was never done before in any of the old shorts or even any of the old 70s and 80s movies they used to have, like the compilation films that I love. But this is also another thing that made Space Jam special, is that it showed that the Looney Tunes are a dysfunctional family. And that's very relatable to people, because I honestly think every family is dysfunctional. People like to pretend and that their family is not dysfunctional. And people think that all the other families aren't dysfunctional and they're perfect. That's not true. That's a fallacy. It's 2024. We all know this to be true. Every single family is dysfunctional. So it was cool to see the Looney Tunes be a dysfunctional family with one another, because they're a really raggedy bunch. They get angry. They're really they're nutty characters, and even though they'll get angry at one another, they'll still like to laugh with one another, because deep down all the Looney Tunes share a lot of traits with one another. So it's kind of like a family where they all got to know each other through time, and even though they had their spats deep down, collectively all the Looney Tunes are a dysfunctional family. This idea of presenting the Looney Tunes as such allows the Looney Tunes to be utilized in other kinds of ways and other kinds of future ideas with them as characters. Because before Space Jam, every Looney Tunes thing was just them beating the crap out of each other, which is hilarious. It was a formula that always works. We love that. It's entertaining, and it was legendary. But how many Looney Tunes cartoons are there going to be where it's literally the same exact thing? I mean, hasn't there been thousands of the same thing? So why not add a little bit of something that changes that, but it still keeps the Looney Tunes characters the same. You see what I mean? Space Jam does not ruin the Looney Tunes. It expands the lore and the possibilities of the Looney Tunes while still keeping their integrity of their characters and their charm intact. That's what I don't understand about all these people who claim to be hardcore Looney Tunes fans out there on YouTube, and I'm not going to mention any names because I'm a YouTuber that doesn't like to do that. But there are YouTubers out there, and they don't have to be on YouTube, of course, but there's a lot of hardcore Looney Tunes fans, and I consider myself a hardcore Looney Tunes fan. I own all the Golden Collections, the Blu-rays, I own all the old cartoons, I own all the old movies before Space Jam, alright? I got Space Jam toys. I grew up with the Looney Tunes. I still love the Looney Tunes. So I'm a hardcore fan too. But for some reason, there's a lot of hardcore Looney Tunes fans that they view Space Jam as being like this stain on the legacy of the Looney Tunes. And I don't understand that. And they always say things like, "Oh, it changed the Looney Tunes, like it made them different." I don't know about all you guys, but have you all seen this movie? Do the Looney Tunes act any differently in the movie Space Jam than in any other thing they've ever appeared in? Like, do they act differently in Space Jam that they do in the shorts? The old cartoons? No. They all act exactly the same. How does Space Jam ruin the Looney Tunes? I don't understand this complaint or this argument. There is one thing that people say is that, oh, it 90s-eyed the Looney Tunes. Like, it made them a 90s version. Which is cool. I mean, I love the 90s. Why would I have a complaint about that? I guess there you could argue there's a little bit of moments in Space Jam, like very little. Like there's like one or two tiny moments where they act like it's the 90s in the movie Space Jam, but it's like one. I think it's only like one single moment, honestly. There's a moment where they put all their hands in just before they start the big game, and Daffy looks at Jordan and he says, "Let's take it to the rap, Jack." And he says that very quickly. And that's like sounds like something a rapper would say. And rap was enormous in the 90s, so him saying that felt like, "Oh yeah, it's the 90s. All right, baby." I thought that was cool, but it was a very tiny moment that most people didn't even notice that he sounded like he was being uh almost urban-esque when he said that line. But I mean, really, is that like a big deal? And also, on the Space Jam soundtrack, and people point this out too, Bugs Bunny did a rap song, which was written by Jay-Z. Now, I like the song. I think it's a charming song. I'm not offended by it as a Looney Tunes fan. I enjoy the song. It's clever. There's something nostalgic about it. Even though I didn't listen to it back in the day, there's just something about it that it gives off like this charming 90s vibe with the Looney Tunes. And I don't know, it just doesn't really bother me that much. And besides, like, that was not in the movie. That was just a song on the soundtrack. And yes, in the new Space Jam, they made one of the Looney Tunes rap in the movie. Porky did a rap. And I can understand people feeling mixed about that. But even still, in A New Legacy, when Porky raps, it's still a very short scene when you look at the film as a whole. So, I don't know why there were a lot of people that made that a big deal. I thought it was cool, but whatever. We're really here to talk about the original Space Jam, you know. Now, the third reason for me personally why I love the film Space Jam so much, and I think a lot of people can really strongly relate to this. Growing up, watching it, it made me want to draw cartoons. It made me want to create my own cartoons. I wanted characters that were like the Looney Tunes, and I felt something really, like it just spurred my imagination watching that film as a kid, especially as a kid. That's why I say to any parents growing who have children, when they reach a certain age, like 4 or 5 years old, show them Space Jam. And when they're like 7 or 8, show them it again. There's just something about that original movie that I think is special. It has a certain kind of specialness that is different from other 90s movies. Another reason why the film Space Jam is so important to me is because it's the greatest time capsule in video form of the 1990s. There's no other movie that's more like the 90s than Space Jam. Like, Space Jam is the most 90s thing ever in just one film. So if anyone who didn't grow up in the 90s and they didn't get to experience how amazing it was, show them Space Jam and basically tell them the 90s was like this movie or the vibes of this movie. So in other words, that's another thing that makes the movie Space Jam so special to people is because this film really encapsulates what people loved so much about the 90s. But I notice nowadays there is like a new trend where, and I'm surprised it's people my age that are acting like this. There's a new trend now where people view, especially 90s movies and stuff, they view them with like a disdain, like, that was the 90s and now it's so cringy. Like, especially when people look back on certain films like Independence Day, and the old Flintstones movie with John Goodman and Rick Moranis. Now there's people that hate the old Flintstones movie. I mean, really, what the hell is going on? And now there's people these days, like as soon as the 2010s fucking happened, now there's people that are like, oh, fuck Space Jam, that movie sucks. And I don't understand, like what is this whole thing where now there's people that look at the 90s like, ugh, that was the 90s. Ugh. Everything in the 90s was all better than now. So I don't understand what is this new thing where you guys think you're like cool and like interesting and you're like harping on something that's 20 years old that people 20 years ago thought was really great, and now it's not for some reason because it's not the 90s anymore. I mean, people still love disco, and disco is from the 1970s. Do you have to only be in the 70s to appreciate disco? If something's awesome, then it's awesome for all time. It wasn't just awesome to the people in the era. Like, people still love stuff from like the 30s even. Like the Three Stooges or the old Universal monster movies. There's not many fans of that anymore, but still, they are out there. I think it really comes from there's a kind of cynicism these days that comes with movie critiques, with movie critics. Um, and I'm a movie critic, and I love to analyze movies. And I think it's really fun to watch someone do a review of a movie on YouTube. And a lot of people do it, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's awesome. I think it's amazing. We get to discuss the film and all this stuff. But there is such a thing. Now, hindsight is 2020. And I understand that sometimes we look back on old movies and we're like, oh, it's not as good as today, like how we view it. But I feel like there are movie critics that overly criticize movies and just in general. Not every single microsecond of a film needs to be overanalyzed to death in every single aspect. You can if you want, and that's cool if you do, but don't like overanalyze it to a point where now you're ruining the point of the movie. There are things, I think, in movies that aren't meant to be analyzed that deeply. Certain moments and shit. But some are. But it's just like, I think if you overanalyze anything at all, you're always going to ruin it for yourself. Say if it's a great book, or even Star Wars. Like, we love Star Wars, right? The original trilogy. But if you overanalyze the original trilogy, then you're going to find all this shit in the old movies that you hate or you don't like. And it's fun to talk about all of it and laugh at it, but don't let those little moments of like stupidity in like an old movie, don't let those moments like make you think, oh, this movie sucks. I never realized it sucked before. What? No. You're just being a dickwad and you're overanalyzing the film. There is such a thing as enjoying a movie or trying to enjoy the movie. The whole idea of watching a movie is to relax. And then afterwards you can talk about all the shit. But just people, I think there's a lot of critics of movies nowadays that a great movie will come out, but everyone will hate it because people overanalyze the thing to death. They don't give it enough time to think about the movie. It's just, uh, now I think for people who watch, there's a certain population of people that just love to talk about the movie itself and not enjoy the movie. Like if a new movie comes out and they just want to talk about everything in the movie. Okay, but did you enjoy the movie though? Yes or no? Like let's start there and then you can talk about like yeah, it's just something that really fucking irks me. And all this negative energy and overly cynicized movie critics these days, especially, all those kinds of fucks are the same ones that despise Space Jam. Not in every argument they make against the film, not every single argument, but in a lot of arguments they make towards the film are like really ridiculous. Another reason why Space Jam is so special is because the animation of the way the Looney Tunes look. I talked about this on another video, but I mean, just look at the damn thing. They look so much better in this one fucking film than they do in all the old shorts, than they do in anything they ever appeared in after Space Jam 1. They spent so much time, effort, and energy and cash into making the Looney Tunes look fucking gorgeous in that original Space Jam. Even scenes that are small moments where you see them standing around with Jordan in like the gym and shit, you can see all the shadows on their bodies. There's a lot of shadow work going on, and it looks really nice, and like you can tell they're really trying to make it seem like the tunes are real and they're with Michael Jordan, who's a human being. And they put so much detail and effort into all the times the Looney Tunes appeared in that film with the animation, the way they moved around, and they did a lot of close-ups. They really wanted to improve the animation of the Looney Tunes and really present them as the superstars that they are and give them like this really incredible polished treatment. And they still look how they're supposed to look. It's their original versions, but they just look a little nicer. And they did look nice like that in Looney Tunes Back in Action, because there were still shadows on them and shit, but they still looked better in the original Space Jam. Yeah. And then in the new A New Legacy, and I love the New Legacy, but the way the Looney Tunes look in that film, they look pretty good looking. They do. But they're very decent looking in A New Legacy. There's a little bit of highlights in here and there, but they really don't look nowhere near as good looking as they look in the original Space Jam. You can just tell by the way they look animation-wise in A New Legacy that they were trying to save all this money. They didn't want to add all the shadows to them. Like, they really didn't want to spend... They spent money on things that shouldn't have been spent on, where it should have been spent on more things that animation fans and hardcore Looney Tunes fans adore. And that's the animation of the Looney Tunes, how they look, how they're being presented on screen. And especially to people who haven't seen them in a very, very, very long time in their original versions because of that crap stain, the Looney Tunes show, the 2010s shit. And I already made a video about the Looney Tunes show. I ranted about that. But, and so, like, they were thinking about the fans in such a way where they did want the Looney Tunes to look how they originally look in A New Legacy. But, they still, I don't know why they chose, like, they didn't choose to make them look as charming looking as they did in that original 90s movie. I think it was just being cheap. I mean, it was laziness. It was being cheap. Now, the budget for A New Legacy was really skyrocketing. So I think they were trying to balance the money and make sure they just spent just enough so that they made sure they had enough money to make a profit back. But they really fucked up because they put a new legacy on HBO Max literally the next day after it aired in the theaters. That was a huge mistake, and I disagreed with the decision at the time, and I know no one gives a rat's ass now because people hate A New Legacy, so no one even wants to talk about this movie anymore except for me, but I thought that was a huge mistake, and let me know if you guys agree with me or not, because they were trying to, uh, they think the trend now is that people would rather watch movies on streaming than go to the theater, so why not put A New Legacy on HBO Max to get people to watch HBO Max because the new Space Jam's on HBO Max? Yes, it's true. There are a ton of people nowadays that would rather see a movie on streaming. And that's a damn shame. I feel it's sad. I don't want the movie theaters to go away. I love going to the movies. And you young people got to understand that back in the day, when it was the 2000s, every time a new movie came out, it was like a huge event. Whether it was a Harry Potter film or Shrek or whatever in the 2000s, when a movie came out, it was a big event. Big, 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 big event. Now it's not so much anymore. Even movies that are a big deal that come to the theaters these days, they are a big deal a little bit, but they're nowhere near as much of a big deal as they were back in the 2000s. So it's sad that people would rather sit home and watch it on streaming. It's really sad. I do kind of blame these new fucking giant TVs that people have in their houses, these enormous TV sets. Because if you got a big screen at home, people are like, oh, well, I'd rather save money and watch it at home with the big screen and all that. They shouldn't have made these enormous fucking TV sets. I was always fine with a medium-sized TV set, and it can be a little big, and that's nice. But I always prefer the old TVs anyway, with the fat backs and all that shit. And it was charming to watch it on a smaller screen at home. And then, like, the whole gimmick back in the day, especially, to go to the theater, was always that you could see it on the big screen. Now it's like people don't think that even matters. People think, oh, my TV at home's just as fine. It's not, but it's sad because now we're living in a culture that's becoming less creative and less excited about movies and less excited about, I don't know, maybe creating art. There's a lot of people that still love to create art, so I don't know if I'll go that far, but I mean, that's a whole other side rant I'm getting into now, but it's just sad. I don't know. It's just sad. Now, here's something that annoys me about what people say about Space Jam is that, look, I know a lot of people who maybe aren't Looney Tunes fans or whatever. A lot of people saw Space Jam and liked it because people love sports, and Michael Jordan was in it, and the other NBA players. So it brought in a lot of fans from all these different places. So that's why another reason I love Space Jam is that it brings pretty much all walks of life to one movie. It's for every race. It's for every fan of sports, every fan of cartoons, every fan of adult animation, adult humor, childlike humor. It just teenagers. It brought, at least at the time, everyone together. So it was a family film, but it also had some secret adult humor in it, quite a lot actually. So it was kind of the ultimate movie experience, like in my point of view. And I'm sorry to say this to all you MJ fans out there, but Space Jam really is special not because of Jordan. Michael Jordan being in the film, looking back on it, it just added more fanfare to the film and got more asses in the seats to watch it. But looking back now, like, the more I analyze Space Jam is that it would have still been a great film. It would have been just as great, almost, pretty much, if Michael Jordan wasn't in it. The real magic of Space Jam is how they presented the Looney Tunes and created new um, characters that weren't Looney Tunes, that were aliens, and they were their own cartoon characters. That's another thing that's special about Space Jam is that they created new cartoon characters to interact with the Looney Tunes. The Monstars, the Nerdlucks, Swaghammer, the aliens. They were new, and they don't make new Looney Tunes characters. And I mean, I love the original Looney Tunes characters, so there's a lot of them. So you really don't need to make new ones. It's cool that they always reuse the old ones, the old original characters. But the whole idea of Space Jam was that they weren't afraid to create new characters. As long as they made them charming in a kind of unique way, but they're still charming, just not... They're charming in their own way, and they're almost charming in the same vein as the Looney Tunes themselves. These days, there's a lot of fan art for the Monstars and the Nerdlucks, and and that's another thing is that people think that, oh, you're a Space Jam fan, so you're not a Looney Tunes fan, and then you're a Looney Tunes fan, but you're not a Space Jam fan. Bitch, if you're a fan of Space Jam, that means you're a fan of the Looney Tunes. That's how it works, motherfuckers. That's how it works. It's a Looney Tunes movie, okay? You dipshits, do you understand? Like, it's a Looney Tunes film. It's not the Michael Jordan movie starring the Looney Tunes. It's the Looney Tunes movie starring Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan is like a guest star in the film. And so are all the other comedians. You could have just had a film where it was just the Looney Tunes versus the aliens, and that was the film. You didn't need to have any human beings in the entire movie. And the movie would have still been great, and it still would have sold tickets. But they were afraid it wasn't going to, so they decided to up the ante, and why not add a celebrity to the film to get people to watch it? More people? Because people already would have watched it, because people love the damn Looney Tunes, okay? This whole, like, fear, like, oh, the Looney Tunes aren't, people don't care about them now. Well, I mean, that's true now, but anyway, that's a whole other thing. I get jealous of other movie series that I also love that got to have sequels. Ghostbusters 1 and 2, for example. I love the Ghostbusters films. And all the Ghostbusters fans growing up in the 80s, they got to have their sequel. They got Ghostbusters 2 in 1989. When I was a kid, I mean, I wanted Space Jam 2 to happen, and I kept waiting and it didn't happen. And then Looney Tunes Back in Action happened, and that was amazing, but it's just like we were robbed of that from our childhoods because they wanted to make a Space Jam 2, and they had all these like great ideas that you can look up, like the old villain, Berserko, and it was going to be really interesting, and it was going to be voiced by Mel Brooks, okay? And then they canceled the project as soon as Michael Jordan said he didn't want to make the film. And looking back, like Michael Jordan, he's so dedicated to basketball and so into doing that as a person that acting really wasn't for him. And that's okay. But they shouldn't have canceled the entire movie completely just because Michael Jordan wasn't going to be in it. And like the film Space Jam 2 didn't need to have a celebrity in it. Or you could have added another celebrity. Why did it have to just be Michael Jordan? And why does it have to be about basketball? Why can't Space Jam just be it could have been its own series of films. Space Jam 2. Tweety Bird gets captured by one of the Monstars, the new Monstars, or whatever. And the Looney Tunes have to rescue her or something. And they go like on an adventure and shit. And they take the moron airship, and now the Nerdlucks are their friends, of course. And it just pisses me off. All these, like, we could have got Space Jam 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, like, think about all the sequels to The Land Before Time. Wasn't there like 8 movies? Or 7, I think? Why couldn't we gotten that? All these other classic 90s movies that people loved got sequels. Balto 2, Bambi 2. There were like 3 or 4 Casper movies, right? Tarzan 2, right? It's just ridiculous. I mean, we did get Space Jam 2 now, A New Legacy. So that happened. So now we do have a second Space Jam. But it shouldn't have taken this long. They waited too long, and they would have made way more money back in the day if they made the sequels then. They even could have been direct-to-video sequels of Space Jam 2, 3, and 4. I would have loved it. Comment down below if you would have loved that as a kid. We all would have fucking loved it. Are you kidding me? There's no question. I collected all the toys of Space Jam as a kid. I had a Space Jam fucking blanket when I was a little kid. I loved Space Jam. And Space Jam, especially as a 90s kid, it made me a Looney Tunes fan. I already knew about the Looney Tunes a little bit before it came out, but as soon as I saw that, I was like, well, now I love the Looney Tunes. Space Jam is an excellent introduction to people, for young people who never saw the Looney Tunes. Show them Space Jam. And, I mean, and all the cool people who watch it will now become fans of the Looney Tunes. You know? Now here's another thing. They didn't follow up with the Nerdlucks characters. At the very end of Space Jam, they became good guys. And it seemed like they were going to be new Looney Tunes characters. And they were going to appear in other cartoons after Space Jam came out. This never happened. What the hell was that all about? I mean, that's ridiculous. And then in A New Legacy, they showed the Nerdlucks in like 2 little clips with recycled animation, which is lazy, but at least they're in there. And when they show them, they're rooting for the bad guys. What? They're good now. They're good guys now. That doesn't make any damn sense. Come on. It's like there were people that were really passionate about the alien characters in Space Jam who created the film. But then, I don't know what happened. Like, they didn't keep those people who created them after Space Jam came out. And, like, I love Looney Tunes back in action. But the thing is that it's just Roger Rabbit all over again. It really wasn't anything new. We've already saw something like that where the Looney Tunes or cartoons in general, they're in the real world and everyone knows they exist. But that contradicts the world building they did in Space Jam. It was more creative and a new idea to show them underneath the fucking ground. And they didn't continue doing that. What was the point of doing that in Space Jam if it wasn't going to amount to anything after this one movie? And Space Jam's so amazing, and it's only one film. It's just that it just seemed like at the time, I have to stress at the time, it just seemed like they were ready to do more with the Looney Tunes. But then when it came to make a sequel, when it came to using the Nerdlucks again, or the Monstars, or whatever, they got extremely lazy. And it's like after Space Jam was released, Warner Brothers just cared about the merchandise of Space Jam. That was it. They just cared about the merchandise, not the story anymore, or the world building they created, or the imagination it gave people and kids and everybody, and adults. They didn't care about that shit anymore. Only the people who made the film cared about all this stuff they created. The creative shit they did in that movie. And the fans, but Warner Brothers were like, nah, we'll just sell another Bugs Bunny Toon Squad shirt. That's it. I mean, what the hell's that about? I mean, it's just like a stupid marketing decision by Warner Brothers. I mean, there's been a lot of heat on Warner Brothers lately, and I love them, but they deserve it. And the whole Coyote versus Acme debacle, right? I'll make another video talking about that. But just think about this decision they made that was bad back in the day, even before now. How they didn't follow up on Space Jam. How they just were lazy, and they were just like, well, we don't care about Space Jam anymore. And then they finally brought it back. And I did love A New Legacy. But it shouldn't have taken this long for it to come out. The amount of people that have died since Space Jam 1 and who weren't able to be alive to watch the sequel, I mean, that's like not right. And I had COVID, and I was in the fucking hospital in 2020 before A New Legacy came out, and it was really bad. I don't want to go too deep into it, but I thought I was going to die, and I was just thinking, well, that's great. Now I won't be able to see the sequel to Space Jam. And, I mean, sadly, we lost a lot of really wonderful, touching people to COVID. God bless them. May they rest in peace. And it's the same thing with The Wizard of Oz, like that old movie, the 1939 one or whatever. Why didn't they make a sequel for like fucking 50 years? There was a bunch of new Oz movies a couple of years ago, right? And they were kind of like concepts of sequels. But it was never like a straightforward... all those new Oz movies, while they're good or whatever, they didn't have the same exact style of that original movie. And I think that was a huge mistake. Why wasn't there a direct sequel to The Wizard of Oz? What the hell was that all about? Now I understand waiting 10, 20 years, or 10 years later, but after 10 years, make the sequel to The Wizard of Oz. What about all the people who died who didn't get to see those new Oz movies? I mean, those people got screwed, and that's not right. I mean, it's not right to the fans. I mean, it's not a moral issue or anything. We're not talking about politics. But still, it's just sad, and it's just so unnecessary. All this laziness. Art is important, and we can't... people, like, neglect things, and I don't know. It's just... Ugh. Now, here's the last thing I really want to talk about, okay? I really hate and detest that people keep saying that Space Jam: A New Legacy is a soft reboot or or whatever of Space Jam. Nope. Space Jam: A New Legacy is a sequel, okay? It takes place after the events of the original movie, and there are little moments in A New Legacy that do reference the events of the first movie. Bugs makes a reference to it where he looks into the camera. There's also a moment where you could see the poster of the original movie in the video they show, the Warner Brothers video they show, LeBron and Dom and stuff. And then also the Nerdlucks are there, guys. The Nerdlucks are in the crowd during the big game in A New Legacy. These three little moments, they acknowledge the events of the first film, okay? A New Legacy is a sequel to Space Jam. You know, people, after they saw the movie before I saw it, they were like, oh, it's not really a sequel, you know, it's like a reboot. It's not a reboot, and it's a fucking sequel, okay? Come on. And the only reason they didn't put number 2 in the title is because nowadays that's a new trend in cinema. For some reason, they don't like to put numbers on sequels anymore. I don't know why. I loved when they used to do that. Jaws 2, you know, Rocky 2, Bloodsport 2. I miss sequel numbers. I thought that was so charming and cheesy. And I guess that's why people hate that shit now, is they're like, oh, it's so cheesy. We're talking about movies! We're talking about fantasy movies! It's supposed to be cheesy! God! People just piss me the fuck off, man. Yes, Space Jam: A New Legacy is a damn sequel. Would it have really been that horrible if they just put the number 2 there? Space Jam 2, Space Jam 2, A New Legacy? Would that have been so fucking damn hard? Come on. It's a sequel. It's not a fucking soft reboot or that shit. It's not a remake either. It's got its own different story. It's similar, but it's not exactly the same, not by a long shot. They were very good at being different than the original. But people still fucking spit on this movie. God! Anyway, I think I rambled on long enough about this. I love you guys. Thank you so much for watching my videos. My fans mean the world to me, so you can leave any comment you want and I'll respond to any question. Like I said, I love you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. And I hope you have a fantastic day and a fantastic weekend. See you later.